Hello, class. This is Mr. Mormon. Today we're going to be learning about a very special classification of organic molecules, which are enzymes. Now, enzymes are very important because they are keeping all living things alive. They are biological catalysts. They are chemicals that control chemical reactions in living things. Now, before we can talk too much about enzymes, we need to do a little bit of background to get some foundation in chemistry before we get started. So let's start with the definition of a chemical reaction. A chemical reaction always involves the breaking and formation of bonds. The bonds will break in the reactants, those are the chemicals you're starting with, and new bonds will be formed in the products. And we can go a step further to say that there's two different basic types of chemical reactions. There are synthesis reactions where large molecules are made from smaller molecules. You have small molecules combined to form big ones. And then digestion is just the opposite. You have a large molecule which is broken down into smaller ones. This, of course, has to happen after you eat your food. It needs to be digested. The large molecules broken into smaller ones that will go into your blood and travel to your cells to be used. Inside your cells, those smaller molecules will be picked up and then will be formed into new larger molecules with synthesis reactions. One example of an important chemical reaction that occurs in your body involves carbon dioxide. Your cells constantly produce carbon dioxide as a normal part of their activity. This carbon dioxide is carried to your lungs through the bloodstream and then is eliminated as you exhale. However, carbon dioxide is not very soluble in water. The bloodstream could not possibly dissolve enough carbon dioxide to carry it away from your tissues, were it not for a chemical reaction. As it enters the blood, carbon dioxide reacts with water to produce a highly soluble compound called carbonic acid. That's this stuff, the H2CO3, carbonic acid. This reaction, if I was to describe it, would be a synthesis reaction. A bond is formed between the reactants. These are the reactants. The left side of the arrow in a chemical reaction always shows the reactants, and the right side shows the products. The second reaction here is what happens so that the carbon dioxide can be released from your body. The carbonic acid is then broken back down into carbon dioxide and water so that that carbon dioxide can be exhaled. This would be a digestion reaction. Here's another common example of a chemical reaction. The iron in these chain links gradually combines with oxygen to produce a compound known as rust. Rust is a combination of iron and oxygen called iron oxide. That would be a synthesis reaction because you have iron and oxygen combining to form iron oxide. To understand how enzymes work, you have to understand the energy involved in chemical reaction. Chemical reactions. Chemical reactions that release energy often occur spontaneously, meaning they'll happen all on their own. But chemical reactions that absorb energy will not occur without a source of energy. These graphs might help us understand a little bit better. This first graph shows the energy of the reactants and the products. After the reaction, the products have more energy than the reactants, and that energy would be the activation energy. This is the energy that would have to be added in order for that chemical reaction to happen. Now, in this reaction, the products have less energy after the reaction has occurred. So some of these occur spontaneously, and then that would look something like this. But this particular reaction, this might be like the combustion of paper, let's say, burning paper. We know that the paper will release energy, but it's not just going to start all on its own. You have to apply some heat or a spark or some source of energy to get the flame started. Once it's started, it will continue releasing that energy, but you have to start it with some activation energy. Okay, so let's talk about the specific things that you need to know about enzymes. The first thing is the definition. Enzymes are biological catalysts. They speed up chemical reactions. They do this by lowering the activation energy. What the enzyme actually does is it lines up the reactants in such a way that a bond can be broken or a new bond can be made, and it takes much less energy. So it just speeds the whole reaction along. You should know that enzymes are proteins, and like all proteins, they're made from instructions on DNA. Enzymes are specific, which means they do just one job. You should also realize that the enzyme itself does not participate in the chemical reaction. It speeds it up, it lines everything up, but it is not used up in the reaction. They are actually recycled. You should know that enzymes work best at a certain pH and temperature. For example, the ones in the human body work best at human body temperature, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. We can also say enzymes are turned on and off by the cell. They are regulated. And finally, the reason that they work is because of their special shape. We refer to the lock and key model where the enzyme has an activation site where the substrates, the reactants will bind with the enzyme and allow the reaction to happen. Everything gets lined up just right so a bond can either be broken or a new bond can be made. Now let's look at a few diagrams and illustrations that might make some of these points a little more clear. Here we see two reactions graphed showing the energy over the course of the reaction. The blue line here represents a reaction without an enzyme, and you can see there's a much greater activation energy than when we add the enzyme. That's the red line here. There's a much lower activation energy. This reaction would happen much more easily and much more quickly. Lowering the activation energy has a dramatic effect on how quickly the reaction is completed. How big an effect? Remember this reaction in which carbon dioxide combines with water to produce carbonic acid? Left to itself, this reaction is so slow that carbon dioxide might build up in the body faster than the bloodstream could remove it. Your bloodstream contains an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase that speeds up the reaction by a factor of 10 million. With carbonic anhydrase on the job, the reaction takes place immediately and carbon dioxide is removed from the blood very quickly. Now this diagram illustrates a few more of the points that we need to know about enzymes. One, notice its special shape, and that the way the artist has drawn it here, the substrates, the reactants that you're starting out with fit perfectly in these little spots in the enzyme, line up perfectly so that this reaction can happen. A bond is broken, a new bond is made, and it's all because everything lined up perfectly when they connected with the enzyme. Now at this point, the hexokinase, that's the name of this enzyme, is ready to do the reaction all over again. They're recycled, so they work because of their special shape, and then they can do the reaction over and over and over again. But this particular enzyme can only do this one reaction that we're seeing here. They are specific. All right, and let's finish up with this diagram. Here we see an enzyme. That's the large blue molecule here. We see the activation site here where the molecule is going to bind in this activation site. Here you see it bound, and the reaction is going to happen. Maybe it's a digestion, and this is going to be broken into smaller molecules. And the question here is what happens to the substrate after the substrate binds to the enzyme? Well, the reaction happens. The substrate is let go. You then have your products, and the enzyme is then free to do the reaction again. Okay, that's it for today. If you have any questions, please bring them up in class tomorrow.